What if I told you the slowest Formula One car in history wasn't just a little off the pace? It was getting lapped during qualifying. And the reason? An absurd W12 engine so flawed, it turned a dream team into a rolling punchline. In just the next few minutes, you're going to see how one of the most bizarre engines ever built destroyed a team before the season even got going. And trust me, stick around till the end, because what happened in their final race is the kind of catastrophe that even Hollywood wouldn't dare script. The origin of a disaster, how life racing should have never existed. To understand just how ridiculous the life racing story really is, you need to know where it all began. Ernesto Vita was an Italian businessman with a passion for racing, but passion doesn't build cars. Vita had no F1 experience, no elite engineers, no facilities. And yet he somehow believed he could enter Formula One and compete with giants like McLaren, Ferrari, and Williams. Now, F1 in the late 80s and early 90s wasn't cheap. Teams were spending millions to shave off fractions of a second. But Vita had a shortcut, or so he thought. He acquired an engine, not built by Cosworth or Renault, but by Franco Rocchi, a former Ferrari engineer who had been quietly developing a unique 12-cylinder engine on the sidelines. It was a W12. That's right, 3 banks of 4 cylinders, arranged in a W shape, crammed into a block that looked like something from an alternate dimension. The engine had never been tested in a race. It had never been run under pressure. And somehow it became the centerpiece of the entire life racing project. That would be like building a space program around a cardboard rocket and hoping for orbit. But against all odds or reason, they pushed forward. The W12 engine, an idea so crazy, it just might have worked but didn't. Let's talk about that engine. On paper, it was ambitious. Franco Rocchi's W12 was supposed to give teams a compact, lightweight power unit with the smoothness of a V12 and the size advantages of a V8. Rocchi believed this design could deliver high performance without the bulk. And to be fair, decades later, car companies like Volkswagen Group would actually build successful W12 engines for road cars. But the Life W12 wasn't built in a Volkswagen lab. It was developed underfunded, undertested, and ultimately unprepared for the brutal environment of F1. It produced barely 400 horsepower, while rival engines were pushing close to 700. And even that 400 horse figure was generous. The thing constantly broke down. It overheated. It misfired. It barely ran long enough to finish a single test lap without smoking like a chimney. There were moments where mechanics couldn't even get the car started. When it did run, the gearbox didn't align properly because the engine had such an awkward layout. Imagine trying to force a square peg through a round hole while the peg is leaking oil and on fire. But still, they showed up. They entered races, and they sent that thing out on track. Slower than anything F1 had ever seen, the laughingstock of the grid. Now we get to the part that makes life racing infamous. Their first appearance in 1990 was at the United States Grand Prix in Phoenix. The W12 car, driven by Gary Brabham, son of F1 legend Jack Brabham, was immediately, and we mean immediately, exposed as hopeless. During pre-qualifying, the session for the slowest teams to even attempt to make the grid, Brabham managed a lap time nearly 35 seconds slower than the fastest car. That's not just off the pace, that's a different time zone. To give you some perspective, in modern F1, if you're 1 or 2 seconds off the pace, you're probably dead last. 3 seconds and you're in serious trouble. 35 seconds? You're a moving roadblock. In fact, the life car was so slow that it was lapped by other cars in qualifying. One F1 journalist described it as painfully embarrassing to watch. The car looked like it was stuck in second gear while everyone else was flying. And that wasn't a one-off. In every single attempt, life racing failed to qualify. Not once did they even come close. The drivers were fighting not for positions, but just to keep the thing running for more than a few laps. The garage of nightmares. When the team itself gave up behind the scenes, it was even worse. Drivers were terrified to sit in the cockpit. Mechanics started quitting. There were race weekends where the team didn't even attempt a proper lap because the car was literally unfixable. There were rumors of parts being recycled race to race because they couldn't afford replacements. Gary Brabham left after just a couple of races. He realized he wasn't driving a Formula One car. He was sitting in a death trap. His replacement, Bruno Giacomelli, hadn't raced in F1 for 7 years. But honestly, no one else wanted the job. And as things deteriorated, so did morale. Footage from race weekends shows the life garage in chaos. Mechanics shrugging their shoulders, engineers scratching their heads, and drivers slumped over with frustration. At one point, the team tried to modify the car mid-weekend without any data or simulations, just to see if maybe they could sneak under the lap time cutoff. It didn't work. It only made things worse. By mid-season, the W12 engine was clearly a failure, so they tried something desperate. Plan B, that was even worse, the switch to the Judd engine. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the season, Life Racing ditched the W12 and decided to fit a Judd V8 engine into the car. Judd was a respectable engine supplier at the time. Several midfield teams used it successfully. But in typical Life fashion, the swap was a total mess. The Judd engine didn't fit the chassis, the engine mounts were wrong, the electronics didn't match, cooling became a nightmare, and the gearbox still wasn't compatible. Instead of improving the car, the engine swap made it even slower. If that sounds impossible, it's not. Life had managed to take one of the worst cars in F1 history and somehow make it worse. The car became heavier, more unstable, and just as unreliable. It still couldn't complete a full pre-qualifying session without something failing catastrophically. The only thing more shocking than the technical failure was the team's refusal to pull out. They just kept showing up, like a bad joke that won't end. The final race, when Life officially flatlined. By the time the Portuguese Grand Prix rolled around, everyone knew Life was done. The money had dried up. The team was exhausted. And yet, they rolled the car out for one final attempt. This is the moment we told you to stick around for. The car didn't even complete one full lap. It broke down on the outlap. Before even starting a time run, it didn't limp back to the pits. It just sat on the side of the track, dead. That was it. No final effort, no miracle fix. Just smoke, confusion, and silence. After that weekend, Life Racing disappeared. No press conference, no formal goodbye. The transporter left the paddock, and the name Life was never seen in F1 again. And honestly, no one missed them. How did this even happen? A case study in delusion. Looking back, the most fascinating part of the story isn't just how bad the car was, it's how anyone involved thought this could work. Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. The level of precision, funding, and planning required is almost unimaginable. And yet, Life Racing entered the arena with a prototype engine, a shoestring budget, and a hope that luck would carry them. It's not just technical incompetence, it's an organizational delusion. Most failed F1 teams at least try to play within the rules of reality. They test, they hire staff with experience, they secure funding. Life didn't do any of that. They brought a science experiment to a gunfight. And in the end, that delusion left behind something kind of poetic. A team named Life that barely made it through a racing season alive. Why the Life W12 still haunts F1 fans today. Decades later, Life Racing has become something of a legend, but not in the way anyone hopes to be remembered. Their name doesn't sit alongside Formula One icons like Ferrari, McLaren, or Williams. Instead, it occupies a very different corner of motorsport history. The kind reserved for stories told with a shake of the head, a smirk, and the phrase, "Can you believe they actually tried that?" Life wasn't just bad. They weren't just underfunded or inexperienced. They were unbelievably ill-equipped. An F1 team in name only, held together by hope, duct tape, and a W12 engine that should have stayed on the drawing board. That engine, though, that's where the legend lives. The W12 wasn't just a mechanical failure. It became a symbol of what happens when ambition outpaces ability. When a bold idea is rushed into existence with no testing, no budget, and no backup plan. Rocky's W12 might have worked under different circumstances. With the right team, with proper development, who knows? But inside the Life chassis, it was a disaster waiting to happen. And it happened over and over again. And yet, there's something weirdly admirable about it all. Life Racing wasn't built on corporate money or cold calculations. It was built on passion, on blind belief, on the stubborn dream that somehow, some way, they could beat the odds. They didn't just fail. They failed in a way so spectacular, so pure, that it became unforgettable. Life dared to exist in a world they didn't belong to, and they didn't just crash out. They left a mark, a tragic, comical, utterly unique legacy. Maybe that's why, even today, fans still bring them up. Because deep down, everyone loves a good underdog story, even when the underdog didn't stand a chance. So, was the Life W12 the worst engine in F1 history? Absolutely. Was it the slowest car ever to enter a Grand Prix weekend? Without a doubt. But was it forgettable? Not even close. There's something unforgettable about a failure this big. It's part comedy, part tragedy, and completely unique in F1 history. And while it's easy to laugh at how hopeless the team was, you have to admire their nerve. They actually did it. They built a car, entered F1, and lived to tell the tale. Barely. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the wildest failures in motorsport, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable racing stories, and drop a comment below. If you were running a team in 1990, would you have taken a chance on the W12, or would you have run the other way? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.